Discover the incredible moment a rancher revealed a hidden truth, transforming his life forever. Jack Reynolds rose with the dawn, the faintest light stirring the Texan horizon. The air was thick and heavy, infused with the scent of hay and dust, wrapping around him like an old friend. Yet, what it pressed against his heart felt like a weight his family's legacy, each breath steeped in tradition and struggle. He stepped onto the porch of his modest home, the walls alive with laughter once shared with Emily and their children, each scratch and nail holding fragments of their life together. But outside, the world loomed large, a corporate giant poised to swallow the very heart of his heritage. A heavy anger had taken root in him, curling around his heart with every sleepless night. The land beneath his feet was sacred, generations poured their souls into its soil. But now, threatened by an encroaching corporation, the fight felt deeply personal. Jack hesitated, wrestling nightly with doubts about what kind of man he was. Would he be worth a damn if he didn't protect what was rightfully his? Days melted into one another in the unforgiving Texas heat. On this hot afternoon, with dust swirling about his boots, he stood knee-deep in memories, repairing an old barn. His fingers grazed the familiar knots in the wood until something unusual caught his attention, a latch, hidden from sight. Curiosity ignited, and he pried it open, revealing a chest battered by time and neglect. Heart racing, he hoped for a treasure but instead uncovered letters, a time-worn tale of betrayal. As he sifted through the yellowing pages, truths spilled forth, things he had never known. His great-grandfather, a man of integrity, wrongfully accused of a crime so heinous it altered the family's legacy forever. Each word etched a visceral reminder of injustice, indignation bubbling inside him. The past was a fierce tempest igniting his resolve, his family's pain sliced through Jack's heart, leaving him trembling. What was he supposed to do with this knowledge? His mind raced with conflicting thoughts, vengeance or forgiveness. He envisioned confronting those corporate moguls, ripping away the luxurious facade to expose the truth. But then, he thought of his children, their futures hanging in the balance. Would he put their lives on the line in his quest for retribution? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Pace quickening, he felt the walls closing in on him. He remembered his grandfather's words, the lessons of resilience whispered down through generations. But alongside those teachings lived the lesson about compassion, the delicate art of understanding. What if forgiving those who brought this pain could rewrite history? A surge of desperation gripped him. He was standing at a precipice, the sunset painting a fiery landscape before him. Should he rally the ghosts of his lineage for vengeance, or reach out and seek a different path? With the letters clutched to his chest like sacred scripture, he stood on the verge of a confrontation that could redefine everything he knew. The air hummed with tension, unresolved emotions clawing at him. What awaited him at the corporate office? Would he confront and risk everything, or would he seek a way to turn their animosity into understanding? The answers loomed like the rolling storm clouds above. The truth had revealed itself, but what came next remained maddeningly out of reach. Jack stood at the edge of a decision that felt like a chasm, the letters weighted in his hands. The history they carried ignited a fierce longing to fight, yet the prospect of retaliation twisted his stomach into knots. He sensed the duality within himself, the defender of a legacy and a father who loved his children more than anything else. The clock was ticking, and each moment steeped in the voices of those who had come before him urged action. Still, the screen of his mind sifted through every possible outcome, his hands trembled slightly as he tucked the letters into his jacket, a physical reminder of the truth he now possessed. As he walked down the path leading to his truck, Jack's thoughts danced between the past and future. His immediate steps felt heavy, like dragging a shadow that had long haunted his family. Should he march into that office, armed with knowledge, prepared for battle? Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, reverberating with the cries of an inherited injustice begging for resolution. He reached the truck, the sun melting into low-hanging clouds. Gripping the steering wheel, he exhaled slowly, attempting to harness the whirlwind inside him. The drive to the corporate office seemed almost surreal, each mile filling him with dread and exhilaration. With every bump in the road, Jack found himself reflecting on the stories behind those letters, the anguish and helplessness of his ancestors pooling into a single moment, bridging history to the present. But there was another question brooding in his heart: what did he hope to gain? Was this merely about revenge, or was there room for redemption? He envisioned those executives, polished and unyielding, sitting behind their desks so far removed from the land and its labor. What courage would it require for him to stand before them and demand justice, not just for himself, but for his great-grandfather as well? Would he choose to be a voice for the voiceless or let resentment define him? Pulling into the office parking lot, his resolve began to sharpen. Jack stepped from the truck, the dust swirling around his jeans mirroring the chaos inside him. The building loomed ahead, stark against the evening sky like a fortress, beautiful yet oppressive. As he moved toward the entrance, a memory flickered: his children's laughter, Emily's gentle encouragement. They were his greatest treasures. What kind of legacy would he leave for them? Jack leaned against the cool glass of the building, breathing deeply. He needed a plan. He would write a narrative far more compelling than simple accusations of wrongdoing. Armed not only with the betrayal of the past but his vision for the future, he could create a dialogue rather than a confrontation. Perhaps he could uncover some humanity in his adversaries, appealing to them not as a farmer but as a concerned father bound by history and love. Yet, doubt slithered in again, whispering that this approach could backfire. The fear of being dismissed, of failing to protect those he held dear, loomed large. He began to ponder the outrageous possibility that perhaps forgiveness, an avenue he'd never considered, could be more potent than spite. Might there be a way to turn enemies into allies? With his heart resolute but the outcome still clouded, he pushed through the glass doors, ready to confront a corporate titan. What awaited him inside was uncertain, but the weight of the letters in his pocket reminded him of the legacy at stake. Jack took a steadying breath, preparing to ask the first question that could alter the course of not just his future, but that of his children and their roots spanning generations. As he approached the receptionist, the noise around him faded into silence. It was time to bridge the past with the future, not with force, but with a call for justice. Would he be met with resistance or understanding? The moment of choice was upon him, and he hadn't yet determined how deep the truth would run. As Jack crossed the polished floor of the corporate lobby, a swell of determination surged within him. Each step resonated with the undeniable weight of his ancestors' struggles, reinforcing his purpose. He approached the receptionist, who barely glanced up from her computer screen, absorbed in the digital world. Jack cleared his throat, suddenly feeling like a stranger in a land that should have felt familiar, a domain defined by financial statements rather than legacy. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous drumming of his heart. "I have a scheduled appointment with Mr. Hargrove." The receptionist lifted her gaze, processing his presence. After a brief moment, she picked up the phone and murmured into it, relaying his name. Jack seized the time to glance around the lobby. It was lavishly decorated, each element emphasizing a culture of achievement and success that seemed worlds apart from the dusty fields he called home. His eyes darted to a framed photograph on the wall, a whimsical poetic statement about prosperity, set against an image of a lush green field. Ironically, it felt more like an advertisement than a tribute to the land's true essence. Encapsulated behind glass were the fruits of tireless work, stripped of the toil, the sweat, the blood that had gone into making it flourish. A knot of anger tightened in his gut as he grappled with the disparity between those thrill-seeking the good life and the reality of what it took to get there. The phone clicked, and the receptionist motioned for him to proceed. Heart pounding, he rounded the corner to Mr. Hargrove's office, the anticipation gnawing at him. He reached for the handle, drawing a shaky breath. This was it. No turning back now. Stepping into the office felt like crossing a threshold into the lion's den. Mr. Hargrove sat behind an immaculate desk, exuding a blend of authority and indifference. The walls were adorned with awards and accolades that meant little to Jack. The corporate titan gestured for him to sit, and Jack felt an involuntary lump form in his throat. "Jack, is it? I understand you have some concerns," Hargrove began, his voice smooth but devoid of warmth. For a split second, Jack toyed with the notion of launching straight into the history that begged to be told. Yet, the vision of Emily and the children tugged at his resolve. "Yes, I do," Jack responded, forcing his thoughts into coherence. "But I'm not here for a confrontation. I'm here for understanding." His voice trembled audibly at the admission, but the sincere intent behind the words anchored his spirit. It was an unfamiliar approach, trembling against his ingrained instinct for battle, yet somehow necessary. Hargrove raised an eyebrow, intrigued but guarded. "Understanding of what exactly?" Jack's breath steadied as he reached into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing against the letters. "Understanding why my family's legacy has been pushed aside, why it's been forgotten in the race for profit." He looked Mr. Hargrove in the eye, the courage rising within him like the tide. "I believe it's time for a dialogue, rather than a war." For a split second, the room fell silent, the air hanging thick with tension. Jack estimated Hargrove's processing time, the clash of corporate culture against a simple farmer's plea for recognition. Would he acknowledge the humanity that lay beneath the layers of wealth? Jack felt a flicker of hope mixed with doubt. Would this interaction be the seed of change, or would it dissolve into a fruitless exchange, reinforcing the chasm he sought to bridge? He knew whatever happened next would define the evolution of his legacy and perhaps his own sense of self. Jack's heart raced at the daunting thought, confronting the embodiment of a corporation that had silenced so many stories. Suddenly, Hargrove leaned back in his chair, considering Jack. "People like us deal in numbers, not stories," he replied slowly, a hardened edge to his tone. "Then maybe it's time numbers met their narratives," Jack replied, his voice unwavering. The tension simmered between them as the faint sound of a clock ticked away. Jack's mind raced. He could either capitulate to fear or take the next step deeper into this dialogue. As the silence unfolded, a question loomed larger than ever. Would he find common ground, or would this conversation classify him as just another forgotten story? As the clock ticked away, Jack could almost hear his heartbeat in the silence, a drum echoing his resolve. The corporate titan, Hargrove, remained impassive, masking any flicker of acknowledgement behind a veil of corporate formality. Jack, however, sensed a crack in the armor, a moment of vulnerability that he could exploit. "Mr. Hargrove," he began, melding urgency with vulnerability. "Each number on your balance sheet represents a family and their story. Behind every profit is a person working tirelessly, just like my ancestors did. It's not just land and revenue, it's legacies that have been intertwined with the soil for generations." Hargrove's expression slightly shifted, hinting at a consideration beyond the realm of dollars and cents. Jack seized the moment, pressing on. "I want to understand the values that guide your decisions, not just the mechanics of your business. Surely, the very foundation of your success is built on something deeper than mere calculation." The corporate leader leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Philosophies about business can be subjective, Jack. We operate with efficiency and return on investment first and foremost." The distance between them felt immense, yet Jack held on to his purpose tightly. What if you could blend that efficiency with a legacy that inspires? He inhaled deeply, rallying his conviction. What if you approached this differently? The stories of your founding families have value. If you integrated those narratives with the numbers, you'd find loyalty and undying allegiance from the land and its people. The words hung in the air, heavy with potential. Jack's heart raced, uncertainty creeping in. Was he being foolishly idealistic? Would Hargrove disregard the authenticity of his plea? Jack felt the weight of 1,000 agricultural struggles behind his shoulders as he continued. Hargrove remained unmoved, studying Jack with an analytical gaze. "Employees and clients want results, not stories. This is a business." "Exactly," Jack countered, his voice growing stronger. "But results driven solely by numbers are unsustainable. Businesses that ignore the human aspect of their operations fail." Just look at those companies that fell off the map because they forgot their roots. For a moment, Hargrove's stoic facade appeared to falter. Jack could almost see understanding dawning like the first light of day. Unconsciously, he leaned forward, sensing the shift. "I am not asking for charity," Jack continued, "but for collaboration. Imagine what we could create together, a sustainable model that revitalizes the community while still being profitable. You could tell the stories woven into the fabric of this company, enriching its value exponentially." The passion in Jack's voice was palpable, igniting something in the room. Was it possible to carve a pathway for his family's legacy to coalesce with the corporation's ethos? Each word felt like a step into new territory, one where his fears clashed against the potential of a more meaningful existence. "I can present those ideas to my board, but substantive change takes time, Jack," Hargrove replied, his voice softer now, pondering the complexities of what Jack had just suggested. Jack felt a surge of optimism, displacing the doubt that had nestled within him. "It starts with you. Be the change, Mr. Hargrove. Reach past the numbers and mine the narratives." The silence that followed felt less oppressive, a tentative bridge being built across the chasm that had divided them. Jack's heart raced with the knowledge that he had initiated a profound conversation, but the stakes were still high. Would Hargrove truly embrace this dialogue, or simply revert to the unyielding world of bottom lines? Jack held the letters tightly in his pocket, the physical embodiment of the legacy he was fighting for. Would this moment lead to collaboration, or would it dissolve into yet another corporate meeting lost to the minutiae of profit and loss? As he locked eyes with Hargrove, uncertainty weighed heavily in the air, yet a flicker of hope danced in Jack's heart. They stood at the edge of a pivotal moment, where the narrative could shift dramatically. "Let us set up another meeting," Hargrove finally stated, breaking the tension. "Perhaps I can explore the implications of your ideas. But don't expect miracles overnight." Jack nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. This was not the end, but a new beginning, one that opened the door to a greater understanding. As he exited the office, a new question loomed in his mind: could he maintain this momentum and keep pushing for change without losing himself in the treacherous waters of the corporate world? The battle was far from over, but Jack felt emboldened, ready to fight for the story that demanded to be heard. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Jack. He immersed himself in preparations for the next meeting with Hargrove, scouring through stories of the families who had worked the land long before corporate strategies dictated its value. Each narrative became a thread in his tapestry of representation, a way to stitch the past to a future he envisioned, one where numbers were simply figures dancing around heartfelt connections. Yet, the creeping shadows of doubt occupied his thoughts as he sat at his desk late one night, late into the hours when the only sounds were the whispers of the wind outside and the incessant ticking of the clock behind him. Each tick seemed to punctuate his uncertainty. Had his proposal truly made an impact, or had he merely triggered Hargrove's interest temporarily? Revisiting his words from their last encounter, Jack felt a combination of pride and vulnerability wash over him. He had stood up for something significant, he had voiced a truth many had forgotten. But would it be enough? The day of the follow-up meeting arrived, and he felt the weight of his ancestors' expectations on his shoulders. Jack dressed meticulously, donning a crisp shirt that represented both his heritage and the professionalism he aspired to embody. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, searching for the resolve and confidence that had ventured forward days prior. But that spark felt diminished now, overshadowed by potential rejection. As he made his way to Hargrove's office, Jack replayed their last conversation in his mind. Hargrove's analytical mindset posed a formidable wall to climb, but Jack believed it wasn't insurmountable. Vision danced before him, bright, compelling, a fusion of heart and industry grounded in authenticity. He needed to appeal to Hargrove not only through emotional resonance but with concrete plans that outlined how human stories could integrate into the company's bottom line. Seated once again in Hargrove's office, Jack observed the room's austere decor. Behind the thick mahogany desk, Hargrove appeared more human this time. A hint of curiosity colored his usually stoic demeanor. It was a fragile opportunity. Jack grabbed the edge of the desk and leaned in, seizing the moment. "Mr. Hargrove," Jack began, his voice gaining strength. I've taken the liberty to draft a preliminary model for the collaboration I mentioned before. I believe our focus should pivot from a purely statistical representation to a narrative one that builds loyalty among stakeholders. Imagine a marketing campaign showcasing stories of resilience, transformation, and dedication, elements that are intrinsic to our community. Hargrove listened, nodding slightly but maintaining an inscrutable expression. Jack pressed forward, fueled by a newfound urgency. He laid out the ideas with crisp clarity: a possible partnership with local farms, organic initiatives, and branding endeavors that celebrated not just the end product, but the journey that brought it there. A silence settled between them, and Jack could feel the electric anticipation of his audience's reaction. He watched Hargrove's face, at first skeptical, then contemplative, as the ideas resonated, each connecting into the corporate machinery that Jack hoped to engage. "What you speak of, it's ambitious," Hargrove finally replied, his voice measured but revealing a touch of enthusiasm. "But you understand this means entrusting the business's reputation, something that carries weight." "Precisely," Jack said, emboldened by Hargrove's interest. "What I am proposing isn't simply about revamping marketing strategies, it's about a fundamental change in how we see value, not merely as numbers, but as relationships nurtured through shared histories. By aligning our operational ethos with the narrative of our collective past, we stand to inspire employees and consumers alike." In that moment, Jack felt himself transforming. He understood the power of vulnerability, his willingness to share his family's legacy embedded in the land, and how it had been the key to unlocking potential in others. Hargrove leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. The tentative air shifted, and Jack's heart echoed with both anxiety and anticipation. Would this be the turning point where vision aligned with corporate ambition? "Let me see that proposal in writing, Jack. If I am to take this to my board, I need substantial backing, not just words. Show me the numbers behind your narratives." As Jack nodded, a realization struck him. He had entered the realm of influence. The path ahead was fraught with challenge, yet the flame of hope did not flicker out. Instead, it roared with possibility. As Jack left the office, adrenaline pulsed through his veins. He was not just fighting for a legacy anymore, he was crafting an entirely new narrative. Yet, beyond the excitement, the pressure to deliver weighed heavily. Could he truly weave the numbers he needed with the stories that mattered? There was no turning back now. In the corner of his mind, a new question emerged: what realities lay hidden within his own research that could further enhance his advocacy? Each step felt like it led deeper into uncharted territory, where his role would test not only his resolve but redefine who he was meant to be. The sun dipped low in the sky as Jack returned to his office, the weight of Hargrove's challenge pressing heavily upon him. He felt the pulse of the late afternoon sun bleed into his workspace, wrapping him in a cocoon of urgency. The stakes had never felt higher, and he understood that this moment was crucial not just for his proposal, but for his own evolution. He seated himself at the desk, remnants of the earlier meeting echoing in his mind. Numbers, he thought again. What would they reveal? His fingers danced uncertainly across the keyboard as he began pulling together the data he would need. It was more than spreadsheets and statistics, it was the blueprint of his vision, the scaffolding for the stories he truly believed in. As he dove into the figures, he felt a flicker of anxiety creeping in. Would the data support the emotional framework he envisioned? Did they bear witness to the lives entwined with the land? He dug deeper, incorporating margins of error, projected growth, and comparative analysis. But numbers alone did not convey a truth, they needed context, emotion to breathe life into the stark figures. Jack stepped back, momentarily defeated. He gazed out the window, letting the beauty of the sunset temper his thoughts. It dawned on him that the numbers should not just highlight economic potential, they should encapsulate a community's resilience, the stories of the families who stood steadfast against the tide of corporate indifference. But translating these sentiments into data without losing their essence was a daunting task. He remembered a conversation with his father about the power of storytelling. The real pull isn't just the goal, it's the journey, Jack. Connect those dots. His father's words echoed in his mind, and an idea sparked. Jack opened a fresh document. As he began to draft a narrative to weave alongside the data, he recalled specific stories from individuals he'd met while researching. The weary rancher whose dreams could be rekindled with cooperative effort, the single mother who planted and harvested not just crops but hope for her children's future. These stories were his foundation, the human pulse behind the numbers. With renewed fervor, he started constructing his proposal. His fingers flew as he outlined tangible benefits to local partnerships, referencing growth metrics juxtaposed with personal anecdotes. This wasn't just a chance to alter Hargrove's outlook, it was a chance to demonstrate a reimagined framework of success, one rooted in community values, vitality, and connection. Hours slipped by, lost in the rhythm of creation. Jack leaned back in his chair, exhausted yet exhilarated. There it was, a fusion of strategic analysis and heartfelt storytelling that stood ready to confront the board's skepticism. But before him lay another hurdle: how to present this amalgamation effectively to Hargrove and his team. He needed to prepare not just for questions of profitability, but for the emotional resistance that corporate barriers often summoned. In the days leading to their next meeting, Jack remained focused. His morning runs became a canvas for reflection as he processed his thoughts and rehearsed his delivery. However, threads of doubt still intertwined with his determination. He was venturing into unknown realms, driven by passion but tethered by fear of failure. What if Hargrove dismissed the emotional stories, viewing them merely as distractions? Or worse, what if he questioned Jack's competency in integrating these narratives with corporate demands? Each morning he confronted these anxieties, reminding himself that authenticity could reshape perceptions. He bore witness to the undeniable connection between people and their narratives, and he was ready to advocate for them. With each passing moment, he began to acknowledge a growing understanding of himself, not merely as a representative but as a catalyst for change. Could he be the bridge refusing to let the corporate machine consume the heart of the community? As the meeting approached, the questions in his mind multiplied without answers. Would this journey mark the beginning of something transformative, or would he fall short of his ambitions? In his final moments of reflection before the meeting, a new sense of clarity emerged. The true challenge lay ahead, presenting this vision with conviction strong enough to resonate. Would he find the courage to confront what Hargrove feared most, the shift from profit to purpose? It was time to dive deeper. How could he ensure that the heart of his proposal beat loud enough for his audience to hear? Jack stood in front of the polished conference table, the bright lights reflecting off its surface a stark contrast to the tumult within him. A mix of anticipation and dread twisted in his gut as he surveyed the room, filled with executives whose eyes would scrutinize every component of the presentation he had painstakingly crafted. The podium felt both like a fortress of resolve and a precipice of vulnerability. He cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice initially faltering but gradually gaining strength. The first few minutes were spent introducing the data, presenting his charts and graphs with careful precision, framing numbers that had once felt so distant and dry. Yet, as he clicked through slides, he infused his presentation with the stories he had gathered. The transfer of this land doesn't merely signify a transaction, it reflects vitality, Jack said with a sense of urgency behind his words. He could feel Hargrove's piercing gaze tracking him. This is about the ranchers whose hopes cling to every sunrise, just like the crops they plant. One of them told me, it's not just about the land, it's about our future. As he spoke, he noticed a flicker of interest in Hargrove's expression, a subtle shift that gave him hope. Jack pressed forward, sharing anecdotes with infectious passion, his nervousness transforming into contagious enthusiasm. The statistics became a backdrop to the human stories. Each number now represented lives woven into the fabric of the community, yet, as feedback began to flow through the room, Jack felt the slightest tremor of doubt. One of the executives, a matronly woman with steely eyes, challenged him. But Jack, how do these narratives support the projected growth? Isn't this just anecdotal evidence? Her words hit him like a jolt of cold air. He had anticipated questions of profitability, but the skepticism still stung, veiling the warmth he hoped to convey. Even amidst his growing confidence, a hint of fear whispered in the back of his mind. Was he just a dreamer, bearing flimsy tales that would dissolve under the harsh glare of corporate scrutiny? Jack's response needed to be both layered and lucid. Weaving these narratives into our projections isn't only a strategy, it's essential. Without understanding the people behind these numbers, we risk alienating the very potential we seek to capture. The weight of his assertion hung between them, the challenge palpable. Silence enveloped the room momentarily, and Jack's heart raced. He had taken a risk. Would they appreciate his perspective, or would it invoke further opposition? After a pregnant pause, Hargrove leaned in, intrigued. What if you outlined a plan to make these personal stories part of our annual reports? The community's engagement with our efforts could transform our brand image. Jack's pulse quickened, recognizing the potential for alignment. This was his moment to elevate the discussion from defensive finance to visionary expansion. Exactly. By showcasing the emotional connections, we can build trust and loyalty, not only fostering community relationships but positioning ourselves as responsible stewards. The back and forth ignited a flicker of collaboration among some executives. Growing bold, Jack decided to delve deeper into his vision. Imagine if we hosted events where these ranchers could share their narratives directly with stakeholders. It could redefine our relationship with the community, allowing them to see us as partners rather than just profit-driven outsiders. Yet, as enthusiasm filled the room, the matronly executive's expression darkened, her skepticism evident. This sounds wonderful in theory, but can we really incorporate such a subjective approach without alienating our core investors? Jack stood firm, grappling with the conflicting forces of inspiration and doubt. Would he remain steadfast in his belief that purpose could intertwine with profit? He could feel his heart thunder in his chest, torn between the impulsive urge to retreat and the burning desire to push through. In that very moment, the weight of his decision crystallized. If we hide behind cold numbers, we will retreat into the shadows. To embrace our humanity is to engage fully with those we serve. Let us not run from the conversations about our impact, let us lead them. They nodded tentatively but with curiosity. It was clear the seeds of a new understanding had been planted, but Jack knew this was merely the beginning. As the discussion shifted and momentum built, he realized that confronting fears was only part of the journey. The battle for recognition of the narrative approach had just awoken a deeper challenge, defining what success truly meant. Jack would need to navigate the minefield of corporate priorities while remaining true to his visions. Would he push back against the tides of skepticism, or would he falter under the weight of established expectations? The outcome teetered in the air. He felt both exhilaration and trepidation as he prepared to chart a path forward, with every heartbeat resonating with determination. He knew the next move might redefine not just his career, but the essence of why he fought for this cause in the first place. But would corporate culture allow for change, or would he have to break down barriers that seemed absolutely solid? As the discussion wrapped up, Jack steeled himself for what lay ahead. The time had come to face the unyielding nature of business, armed with stories that might just reshape the landscape of their futures. Would his vision hold firm against the complex realities of his ambition? Jack left the conference room, the buzz of conversation trailing behind him like a fading echo. He felt his heart still racing, a blend of exhilaration and increasing apprehension churning within him. The atmosphere had shifted in subtle ways. Some executives had begun to embrace his vision, but the lingering skepticism from the matronly executive weighed heavily on his mind. Had he truly struck a chord, or was he merely postponing the inevitable backlash against his ideas? As he walked down the sterile hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead mirrored his internal conflict. He had opened a door toward potential collaboration, but was he equipped to push through it? That question cut deeper than any criticism he had faced in the meeting that he reached his office and slumped into his chair, both thanking and cursing the quiet. The walls seemed to close in as his thoughts spiraled. He pulled up the notes he had made during conversations with ranchers, rediscovering the heart and soul of those stories. They had been more than mere data points, each recounting was a unique thread in a complex tapestry, illustrating lives shaped by agriculture, dreams rooted in the soil, and the harsh realities of climate and economy. Would it be enough to convince the naysayers? Jack took a deep breath. He couldn't yield to the creeping doubt despite the voices in his mind insisting that he might be overreaching. He needed to gather all the support he could, not just from the boardroom but from the voices he sought to represent. That evening, he glanced at the clock before picking up his phone to contact several ranchers he had met over the past few months. His fingers hovered over the screen. A quick connection could reinvigorate his conviction. They had shared stories of resilience, and it was time to remind himself of those narratives. It felt vital, almost sacred, to keep those connections alive. He dialed the first number, and when the voice on the other end greeted him, Jack felt a renewed surge of purpose. "Hey, Rebecca," he said, trying to summon the enthusiasm he felt during the presentation earlier. "I wanted to touch base about what we discussed regarding sharing your story with more people." Rebecca's voice brimmed with the warmth that Jack had found so comforting. "Jack. Absolutely, I'd love that. It's just been tough here, with the drought and all. I've been trying to find ways to express what's really going on." Her words pierced through Jack's fog of insecurity. This was not just data, it was an honest portrayal of struggle and grit. "If we can get your thoughts into a compelling narrative, I believe it could resonate. Maybe even sway some opinions within the company." As they talked, a spark ignited in Jack. Here was a rancher, determined despite her challenges, willing to share her truth. This conversation wasn't just professional, it felt pivotal to Jack's journey. He realized that by uplifting others, he might find the strength to uplift himself in the corporate arena. "Let's set up a time for you to share your story," he proposed, feeling bolder. "I want to make sure your voice is heard, especially now." The dialogue flowed smoothly, and Jack mapped out a plan where more ranchers could be included, forming a mosaic of experiences that highlighted both their struggles and triumphs. As he hung up, a new idea took root. Would a visual presentation involving these ranchers increase the emotional weight of his prior pitch? The clarity of purpose washed over him like a cool breeze cutting through the sweltering heat of doubt. He realized it wasn't enough to merely articulate the stories, they needed to be lived experiences showcased authentically. However, even as excitement surged, shadows of apprehension still lurked. What if the executives remained unmoved? Jack closed his eyes, focusing in on those narratives, drawing strength from them. He had to confront the possibility of rejection without crippling hesitation. This wasn't merely about success, it was about authenticity, about merging values with corporate aspirations. He understood now that he was not only advocating for his vision but also creating a platform for voices silenced by the corporate noise. Would these narratives genuinely bridge the gap between skepticism and acceptance? Could he attract enough momentum to uphold the ideals he believed in, all while navigating the relentless currents of the corporate machine? As dawn created a subtle glow against the windowpane, Jack prepared for another day, armed with determination and the confident stories of those he truly believed in. But deep down, he sensed that the journey was just beginning. What awaited him next would test the very limits of his resolve and every ounce of his spirit. Jack awoke to the weak light of dawn creeping through the blinds, a vague reminder that today marked the beginning of something crucial. The meeting with the executives loomed closer, and his plan to integrate the ranchers' narratives had blossomed into an almost tangible anticipation. The mundane routine of showering and dressing felt invigorated by an undercurrent of urgency. Every choice this morning symbolized his commitment to embody the change he sought, and the self-doubt that had plagued him began to feel like an old garment he could shed. With a sense of purpose, he assembled a multimedia presentation that would showcase the ranchers' stories through videos, photographs, and direct quotes. As he pieced together the narratives, he felt invigorated. Jack envisioned the faces of those he spoke with, the strength behind their words encouraging him to press forward. Each rancher's story was a testament to resilience, a reminder that there are truths buried beneath the surface, waiting to be excavated and exposed. After he had fully rehearsed his presentation a few times, he decided to reach out to more ranchers. He needed additional voices, perhaps even those who could share a perspective he hadn't yet considered. He dialed the phone number of Daniel, an older rancher with deep roots in the land, who had hinted at secrets wreathed in vulnerability the last time they had spoken. "Hey, Daniel," Jack greeted, his conviction surfacing as he spoke. "I'm assembling a presentation to highlight rancher stories, and I wanted to include yours. I remember you mentioning that there are challenges beyond what we typically discuss. Jack, Daniel replied, his voice slow but steady, like an old oak weathering storms. What I have isn't easy to put into words. Sometimes it's about more than just the cattle. There are things we carry, burdens that run deeper than our fields. Jack leaned forward, intrigued. That's exactly the sort of thing I want to bring to light. What's weighing you down? After a pause, Daniel let out a heavy sigh. It's the legacy of my father. He held on to traditions and, in turn, built walls. The land is sacred, but it's more than dirt under our feet, it's about memories, choices, and, sometimes, failures. I lost sight of that. As Daniel spoke, Jack found himself questioning his own burdens, the expectations he carried, the need to conform to the corporate mold, the fear of failure looming ever present. What stories did he suppress in favor of ambition? Would he, too, build walls around what mattered by striving for progress without reflection? I think it would be powerful to share that perspective, Jack encouraged, his voice brimming with authenticity. People need to understand that ranching isn't just a business, it's a life full of challenges, and those challenges shape us. I'll share, Jack, Daniel replied, determination cutting through the melancholy. If it means someone out there understands, I'll share it all. After hanging up, Jack felt both a surge of gratitude and an increased burden. Daniel's vulnerability could be a double-edged sword. It held the potential to create a deep connection with the executives but also left him exposed. If executives questioned the context or intent behind these stories, would they dismiss him entirely? He busied himself for the remainder of the day, fine-tuning his presentation, but the sentimental heaviness hung over him like a storm cloud. He was both the storyteller and a subject of scrutiny, battling his insecurities while orchestrating a tapestry of narratives that laid bare the human experience behind the numbers. Later that evening, after another round of final adjustments, he locked eyes with his reflection in the mirror. "You can do this," he whispered, reminding himself of the power of authenticity. But as Jack turned away, the echo of self-doubt persisted. What if the executives saw merely a collection of stories rather than the intricacies of a life lived? The imminence of the meeting felt like a threshold, a demanding test of not just his ideas, but of his very identity. In the hours that followed, Jack's thoughts drifted to the consequences of failure and success alike. Would he rise as a champion for those who entrusted him with their truths, or would he fall victim to the corporate apparatus, burying the essence of their stories in ambiguity? With the clock ticking down to the meeting, an unforeseen revelation sank in. His personal journey was inextricably tied to the emotional cores of those he aimed to represent. The stakes had never felt higher. The true challenge wasn't merely to present, it was to remain unwavering in the face of potential rejection. As he braced himself for the confrontation with the executives, a chilling thought struck him: was he prepared to reclaim his own truth when the moment came? Before he could delve deeper into these anxieties, the phone rang. The voice on the other end could potentially change everything. Jack picked it up, heart racing. "Jack, this is Rebecca," she began, her tone urgent. "I think we need to talk. Something has come up, and it's important." What could it be? Jack felt the weight of anticipation settle heavily on his chest. The next morning, Jack woke to the echo of Rebecca's words still resonating in his mind. Something has come up, and it's important. As he paced around his kitchen, the urgency pierced through his anxiety and held him in a grip of anticipation. Whatever it was, it could be the catalyst he needed as he prepared for his critical follow-up meeting with Hargrove and the executive team. Jack quickly brewed a cup of coffee, the deep, rich aroma weaving into the fabric of his historical traditions. Just as the bubbles subsided in the pot, his phone buzzed vigorously on the counter. It was Rebecca. The moment felt monumental. "Jack," she said, her voice steady yet laced with concern. "The drought hit our area harder than we anticipated, and it's affecting not just us but the whole community. We need to reach out for support, something concrete, something that will finally enact change." Jack's heart raced not just with concern for his friends and colleagues, but with the realization that this could resonate powerfully in his presentation. Yes, it showcased a real and pressing issue that transcended individual farms and connected all their struggles. "What do you suggest?" he asked, trying to harness the momentum building inside him. "I have a few ideas about how our stories can rally others to our side: potential partnerships, community initiatives," she explained. "We have to show that this isn't just about us. It's about a stronger collective that can't be ignored." Jack's mind sprinted with possibilities. This was the point he'd been trying to prove: the intertwining web of narratives could become a force for unity, a call to action that no one could dismiss. "Let us meet tonight," he urged, inspired. "We can brainstorm how to integrate these aspects into my meeting with Hargrove." Later that evening, as Jack and Rebecca hammered out ideas, he felt a surge of clarity. The stories they had collected over time finally held the potential to create a framework for change not only at the corporate level but throughout the ranching community. "Each narrative will hold its own weight, echoing the urgency of our circumstances," he pointed out. "If we frame our plight as an opportunity for the corporation to engage, they LLC value beyond numbers and a responsibility to act." With Rebecca's input sharpening his focus, Jack crafted a proposal that was both personal and actionable, a call for assistance tied to every story he intended to share. He could no longer merely present the pasture of his ancestors, he needed to draw parallels between the past and future, configuring the fabric of community struggles into the strength they could advocate together. As he drew closer to the day's meeting, Jack's confidence had transformed. Sunlight filtered through the window, warming his desk like ancestral promise. This presentation would encapsulate not only his vision of collaboration but an emotionally charged narrative of shared burdens and hopes that could bridge old wounds between ranchers and corporate machinery. The event unfolded before him like a vivid tapestry woven from his life, now buoyed by a collaborative spirit. Jack arrived early, settling into a rhythm he had not anticipated. Gone were the fear and doubt, replaced with a resolute sense of purpose. He strode confidently toward the polished conference room, trusting that each voice he represented would magnify his OWN. As he began to deliver his presentation, Jack seamlessly integrated Rebecca's tough realities and insights, layering their collective stories atop the previously established data. Executive faces softened with empathy, the usual defenses crumbled ever so slightly, revealing the humanity behind their apprehensions. Jack had turned the conference room from a fortress into a space for dialogue. Then came the pivotal moment. One executive nodded in agreement. "If this initiative succeeds, it could redefine our approach in valuing community involvement," she said. "But what sort of measures will you implement to ensure these partnerships remain authentic?" Jack's heart quickened. This was it. An opportunity to stress the importance of genuine collaboration. Transparency will be critical. Regular community meetings, feedback mechanisms, and the incorporation of collective narratives into our annual reports will ensure accountability and authenticity, he articulated, drawing from the stories he had woven into his vision. Hargrove leaned in, seemingly intrigued. "Jack, can you outline a timeline for these initiatives?" As he presented a structured rollout plan, it resonated deeply, not only because of the approach he took but because it represented a shift, a collective awakening grounded in reality rather than abstract numbers. Jack felt accomplished, a sense of fulfillment washing over him at that moment. When the meeting adjourned, Jack stepped out, the weight of uncertainty lifted for the first time. He felt like a different man, confident, ever resolute. This was beyond just a fight for his land. He had transformed from a solitary warrior into a spokesperson for a collective, embodying the strength of community voices. Days later, as he glanced at the newspaper headline that announced the partnership between the corporation and local ranchers, he realized the gravity of his transformation. Jack Reynolds was no longer merely a rancher, he was a catalyst, a bridge, a champion for a legacy renewed through shared understanding. With a heart brimming with conviction, Jack knew he conquered the fears that had haunted him. He had faced the corporate giants armed with stories, and emerged with not just victories for his own family, but dignified partnerships for the greater community. This was his achievement, the realization of a lifelong dream, forged in the fires of struggle and vulnerability. Now, he stood proud, not just for himself but for every person who had trusted him with their stories. Jack Reynolds had achieved a strength and recognition he never knew was possible. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach the true fans of personal overcoming stories. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jack's journey, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative conclusion. Don't wait even one more second.